This is the Andrew Baker podcast, and you are playing a losing game. Okay. A game in which you will never win. Okay. You see, games are traditionally uh, competitions where players agree on a set of rules. Okay. If you and I are playing soccer, both you and I have to agree to these rules before we can actually have an effective game. Okay. When you are using social media, you are not agreeing to rules by another player. You are agreeing to rules that are set by someone else and in which you have no say in the matter of. Okay. This conversation with Rob Krekack is insane. He's such a knowledgeable dude. I Something I'm walking away with is that like this is a losing game. Okay. Get that shit off of your phone. If you need to manage social media, do it online. Like, do what you need to do to control this. If you run your business around social media, obviously find ways to control it. But again, if you're just using social media for personal use, scrolling, distracting yourself, you are losing big time. And Rob and I go pretty in depth as to why that is, why social media anxiety is a thing, how it's affecting your work. And we also talk about how a 4-day work week might be the key that you need, your company needs to bring mental health back into the workplace and get even more productive with 4 days instead of five.
Yeah, so the phrase I use is I'm a technology mindfulness expert. And so
Yeah.
and that's not a phrase that, I heard somewhere. It's just something that I'm actually using to describe myself. It's something that I think people need to start to be aware of because, we're using technology for 3/4 of our day, basically 7 days a week. And so there's so many things about technology that are affecting our mental health, relationships and productivity at work. And I'm here to show people that with just a little bit of awareness and changing just a few things, you can completely change your life and be so much happier, get more done, be less stressed, have better relationships, just with a little bit of awareness and changing a few things about how you use your technology. It's not, and I'm not, by the way, just to be super clear, I'm not anti-technology. I always say I'm pro-humanity. I'm not anti-technology. I'm pro-humanity because I'm a nerd. Like I built my first computer in middle school. I love technology. I think it does amazing things for humanity, but not all of them are amazing anymore, right? And so I'm just here to bring awareness to people so that they can decide how they want to, live their life maybe in a different way.
Yeah. So Rob, this is going to take us on the most extreme tangent in the entire world. Um, but did you so in regards to the Buffalo shooter, did you get or read any clips of the manifesto that he posted online?
So, you're going to be surprised, but not only did I not read the manifesto, I don't even know what you're talking about, and I'm actually really glad about that. And here's why. So,
Yes.
what a lot of people don't understand about the news is that the business model of news companies is to show
Mm,
you anger inducing and fearful content because humans naturally pay attention to that. It's a survival mechanism. So let's pretend
100%.
10,000 years ago when we were cavemen and cavewomen, you needed to pay attention to that type of information. Like, for instance, hey, is that other tribe over there talking about a saber-toothed tiger that could attack my tribe? Because if I pay attention to that information and then I'm aware that this saber-toothed tiger could attack, I can use that information to help keep my tribe alive. And so that's actually good information that I need from a survival standpoint. Well, the modern day news is feeding all kinds of information like that to you because generally humans pay way more attention to and are way more emotionally charged from negative stuff. And when they're more emotionally charged, they pay more attention. There's more eyeballs on the news. Therefore, there's more advertising dollars. Therefore, the news companies make more money. And so it sounds crazy, but I have made a very conscious decision, and this is exactly part of my entire business model with Humans First. I've made a conscious decision to not watch the news almost in any way, shape, or form. And I, first of all, feel like I'm so much happier because of it. But the other thing is, if there's something super important, someone like you or my wife or some other person that I'm talking to will tell me about it, and then I'll find out about it that way. And then
Yeah.
I know what's really really important is if a bunch of people tell me about it. Like for instance, I found out about BLM from my wife. Like I didn't
Hmm.
I didn't, I mean, I vaguely heard about it, but like, I didn't hear anything substantial about it until my wife and I had a conversation one day because she was reading about it. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I know
Yeah.
that that's a very unconventional stance on the news, but I think it has really served me very well.
No, and I totally agree that it does, that it does serve you. Just that phrasing pro-human really is like it's a soft spot right now, right? Because the manifesto is anti-human
Oh,
to
is
a
it?
to a large degree, to a large degree.
Well, and
And so I'm very much a fan of anyone that is pro-human for sure. So
yeah.
I just that phrasing connected with me there.
Yeah, well, I'm really glad to hear that, man. Exactly, pro humanity. And let me actually explain. I truly believe that I understand what's happening to humanity in regards to people hating other people. I really, truly believe I think I've figured this out, and I think no one else is quite understands this. So, here is the root cause of, I think, a lot of the problem. So let's pretend I'm on, like I'm watching one of your podcasts on YouTube, right? Do you post them to YouTube as well, or do you just do
Yeah.
podcast? Okay, so let's pretend I'm on YouTube. I'm listening to your podcast, and something that another guest says just like rubs me the wrong way. Well, I when I leave a negative comment, I don't see the look on your face or the look on the guest's face when they read the comment, right? Like they'll probably read it the next day. And if I said something really negative about a guest, they may get like really truly hurt, or like that may offend them, or that may make them feel really bad. But I don't see the look on their face. There's no empathy online. And so this lack of empathy is allowing or gives people the permission, or they think they have the permission to just say super nasty things to people, whether it's a stranger or someone they know online, because they can't see the reaction in their face. And so what this does then is this causes so many people to say things that they would normally never say to someone if they were standing there face to face. There's so many comments, but here's why that's problematic. So again, I like to talk a lot about what happened 20,000 years ago when we were cavemen and cavewomen, because that's how we're really programmed as humans, right?
I
20,000.
mean, it's way more than 20,000 years, right? No,
Right.
I'm totally on board. It was like millions of years of conditioning. No, I'm totally on the same page with you.
Yeah, I just say that 20,000 years because it's like, gives you a sense of the time frame. But 20,000 years ago when we were cavemen and cavewomen, what happened was when, like, let's say my tribe got, disagreed with another tribe, right? Well, what would happen is we would maybe disagree for a little bit, but if it got really bad, my tribe would just leave. We would just go away from those other humans that we didn't like. And so I think that this is happening on a worldwide scale to 4.2 billion people who are connected to the internet. I think what's happening is people hear other nasty things from other people online because there's no empathy. They develop a general distrust of other humans in general, or humanity, and that is causing people to hate other humans, or move away and not want to be by other humans, or only be with their spouse. There's a lot of different ways I think this is manifesting, but I truly believe that everything that's happening online is contributing to this general mistrust of other people and hatred of humanity. And I think it's a huge issue that we need to be aware of, and realize that we are all humans and that we're here to be with other people, which I think is an amazing part of humanity, and it's to me one of the most rewarding
Yeah.
and one of the things that makes me the happiest.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess I have a question there because I agree, like, hey, 20,000 years ago, we're in our tribes. I don't think running away was, or like leaving was, I mean, it may have been the primary method, but like there was still a lot of war,
Totally.
right? Like
Yeah,
tribes still fought a ton, right?
clearly.
And I always, especially when it comes to social media, I think of the Dunbar number
Yeah,
where
150.
yeah, it's 150, right? Um, you know, 140 to 160, 150 is the average, right? So this, it's just so interesting this idea that like we can truly only have so many close, good, fulfilling relationships,
Yeah.
and then it's like almost everyone outside of that has to be the other tribe, the other tribe that we don't get along with, the other tribe that doesn't have the same values as us. But the issue, what like I feel like that's a massive problem when it comes to social media,
Yeah.
because like to your point, back when we're in tribes, right? At some point there is some type of separation between the tribes, whether it's voluntary or whether it's through war. Now there's no separation. You are constantly interacting with people that you do not give a fuck about,
Yeah.
and that's like incredibly dangerous, and it leads to like what you're talking about, incredibly insensitive, rude comments on the internet, people disagreeing, when in reality, if those two people got together and had a decent conversation over a cup of coffee, they'd probably realize it's maybe one of the three things that they at their core disagree with, but everything else they do have in common.
Yeah. Would you mind if I gave some commentary about Dunbar's number and
Please, oh please.
so because I read a couple papers from him and I found it super interesting and how it's interacting with what's happening online. So 100% agree. Dunbar's number is 150, which he defined as like the number of like reasonably close social connections that we can have with people. But if you study his research, he actually has tiers of we have tiers of relationships with people that start from 5 people, then go to 15, then 50, then 150, then 500, then 1500. And so he defines the biggest tier, 1500, as the number of faces that you could possibly recognize in a crowd, right? So like that's like
Mm.
the very,
What's the researcher's name again, Rob? Just so
Robin
people can look.
yeah, Robin Dunbar, Dunbar.
Okay.
Dunbar from Dunbar's number, but like
Yep.
he's done all this other research about relationships and so what if you look at the number of interactions that you have by tier, right? So like for instance, I have actually exponentially more interactions with my tier of 5 people than I do with the 15 tier. My
Mm.
15 closest people. And so
Everyone at work,
right, right. And so
right?
you've probably heard this phrase, you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And what his research is showing is that is for good or bad is really true, right? But
Mm.
what I think is interesting is so if you look at that and you compare it to social media, here's what's happening. Here's what social media does. It makes you think that so for instance, if humans are really meant to connect with a close group of 5 people, and that's at our core, like those are the most important relationships. What I think happens is people say to themselves, "Oh, I'm going to have 100, or 200 or 300 relationships online." And instead of having those 5 close relationships, they think that it's better to have 300 kind of close relationships. But in reality, they don't just go from 5 close relationships to 300 close ones. They basically go to like zero really truly good relationships. And they just kid themselves that they're good ones because it makes them feel good because it's a number, right? Like, oh, it sounds good to have 300 friends online or 500 friends online. But really, what is the quality of those relationships? I think it's totally different. And I think social media is sort of commoditizing friendships, which I don't think is a good thing.
When so as you're saying that, I we are so obsessed with numbers
Yeah.
as humans. Like it's actually insane to me. Have you thought about why we obsess over, I the actual follower number like makes sense to me because it's like a form of status, and
Yeah.
status always led to better places to sleep, more food, more sex, more mating, the whole thing, right? So the actual like having more followers than someone else makes total sense. But what is this? It's like for YouTube video titles. Instead of best ways to operate a video camera, oh, 5 best ways to, like, it's like, oh yeah, let me click on that. Like, what is this obsession with numbers that we have?
Yeah, so there's a really great white paper. It's about 40 pages long by an author named Nguyen, Nguyen. And the title of it is something like The Gamification of Communication on Twitter. It is freaking fascinating. So this guy is an expert on two things on games, and he's also an expert on echo chambers, or like you could think of it as cults, but it's not just cults, but similar, right? And so he writes this paper and here's kind of the analogy he gives. And he basically says, and I totally agree, that we are gamifying everything in our world, and it's not a good thing. So here's the example he gives. As you just said, on and specifically researches Twitter. He says so on Twitter, you have this different methods to measure engagement. It's likes, retweets, and comments, right? And that's really
Mm,
standard across social media in general. Well, here's why that's damaging. So let's pretend we're in an era where we had no social media, right? If you went to a party and there was 20 people, and you talk to people and you think you're having good conversations, and you chat, you say you chat with every single person at the party, right? And you're like, yeah, I feel like I had pretty good conversations, I connected with people, that was great, right? And there's no objective rating of your conversation, right? You're just thinking to yourself, you have this good feeling about the conversations. Makes sense. Well, here's what Twitter is doing. What Twitter does is essentially, if you were at this party, it would tell you your rating of how every conversation went when you left the door, and quantify it for you, and inform you, hey, these other 19 conversations, this one was a 6, this one was a 4, this one was a 3, this one was a 9, this one was a 2. It would quantify every conversation with you and then make a report for you and say, hey, here's how good of a conversationalist you were at the party. Are you happy with it? That's exactly what Twitter is doing on a massive scale. And what used to be a very subjective thing, a conversation at a party, is now a very objective thing. And humans, that's not good for humanity, because we're not we don't need to have feedback on every single part of our lives, but that is essentially what quantifying everything is doing.
mm,
Does my
mm.
analogy make sense about the party?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I feel like even to follow, I wasn't sure that's where you're taking it. I thought because as you were speaking, I thought, if I were to really go to a party, yeah, I might say hi to all 20 people, but I'm probably going to settle down with three or four of my really close buddies
Yeah.
at the end. Like after
Uh-huh.
I've said hi to everyone, give the knuckles, give the hugs, I'm going to go talk to my buddies in the corner about my fishing at Tibble Fork yesterday,
Yeah. Well, and that's
you know?
another thing that Wynn says is, all these metrics for social media, they do nothing to measure the depth or the impact of the conversation. So for instance, let's say I put something on Twitter and 100 people like it. Well, let's say for 99 of those 100 people, it changes their life and makes them do something drastic, and it greatly improves their life. That's incredible. But now let's say I say something else, and for 99 of those people, they hit like and they like it, but it really did nothing else beyond that moment.
Mm,
Those two comments are measured exactly the same way on Twitter, yet one clearly had an amazing impact on 99 people's lives, and the other one only had an impact on one person's life. And so you don't it's Twitter is not designed to capture that information, yet that is an impact on humanity and all those people.
yeah. And kind of what you were saying about news channels, like people on the individual level do this. I'm really passionate about working out, lifting weights,
Love
specifically
that.
like a very bodybuilding esque type of training.
Hmm.
I just personally love it. So that's what I do. That's part of the world that I live in. The amount of bullshit that gets spewed from so many mouths online. But those
Oh.
are the mouths, those are the Instagram profiles that get the attention, get the likes, get the follows. And like the trainers that I used to train with, who are incredibly knowledgeable, post amazing, real, valuable content, but aren't as like flashy or outlandish or like whatever. Like they get close to no engagement. And it's so incredibly infuriating.
Yeah. So what happens is, I mean, there's a bunch of comments that I can make about that. The first one is, so I read this book called The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. I
Yep.
absolutely, like, if there was one single book that I wish I could make humanity read, it would be that book, The Laws of Human Nature. And the reason that I thought it was so impactful for me is, it's like a blueprint for human behavior and why we do things and why we say things. And one of the things that really stood out to me from that book is that so much more of human nature is driven by envy and jealousy than we understand. And even ourselves, like, it doesn't even register for us that we are envious or jealous of people. It just kind of happens subconsciously. And I think, especially with these fitness people online, what happens is, for sure, like, so many of them are very good looking, they're very they look very fit, and that's great. Like, I'm not taking that away from them, but what happens is, when many people see that and they then even subconsciously measure themselves or compare themselves to that person, what happens a lot of time is they're not as fit, right? That person observing the model on Instagram isn't as fit. And so this subconscious envy or jealousy comes up. But envy or jealousy is not a very socially acceptable emotion. But what is more acceptable is anger. And so they get angry, and it's a way for them to express their emotion or their jealousy or envy. And so, and again, talking about what I was saying
Rob,
earlier.
I want
Yeah,
to clarify there real quick. When you're
for
talking
sure.
about socially acceptable, are you talking about from like an evolutionary like a evolutionary standpoint, or from like a modern culture it's more okay to be angry than it is to be envious in like today times as opposed to um 20,000 years ago in the caves?
Great question. Yeah, great question, Andrew. I guess my answer doesn't really depend on the time frame, whether it's 20,000 years ago or today, but I'll explain. So, if I say, "Hey, Andrew, I am really envious of your biceps," right? What I'm essentially saying is, I am less than you. Like, I'm saying, like, I'm acknowledging that I am less than you, or that my biceps are smaller than yours, right? Which is
Mm.
fine. But people don't like feeling inferior to other people. And so, instead of admitting that they feel envy or jealousy, which then admits to themselves and to other people that they're inferior, they use anger, because anger isn't a doesn't involve a comparison necessarily. It just involves a different emotion that doesn't, let them feel inferior to someone else. Does that make
And I
sense?
feel like, yeah, absolutely. I feel like, I mean, you can see this in fitness. I feel like this is also like you can see this politically nowadays. Like, if I get angry at you, I'm saying it's almost a way to say to put yourself in a different value hierarchy than the
Yeah.
one you're criticizing.
Yeah.
And if you're outside of that value hierarchy, you're not acknowledging that you're inferior to that person because, oh, that's so terrible, you're disgusting. I would
Uh-huh.
I'm I'm not part of that value hierarchy at all, so I can criticize from outside of it without actually acknowledging that I feel inferior to you for X reason.
So yeah, it's a really great point, right? It's a really great point. Here's another kind of example though, that I tell people, which I think helps them understand a little bit more about, like why this comparison online is so dangerous. So again, 20,000 years ago, we're in a tribe of, let's say, 20 people, and so in that tribe of 20 people, let's say there's 10 men and there's 10 women, right? Roughly. And if I'm a guy and I'm a young guy, there's probably another two men my age out of 10, right? Because, that's in a tribe of, 10 men, there's probably older men and younger men. So, really, 50,000 years ago or 20,000 years ago, I was essentially comparing myself to two other men my age, two other peers. Well, what happens today? Now we don't compare ourselves to two people, we compare ourselves to 2 million or 2 billion, depending on what your audience is, right? And even if it's not on social media, I'm even just saying in the regular media, if you're looking in the media and you're comparing yourself to all the people in the media, there's always going to be someone smarter than you, more successful than you, more talented than you, all of the above, because the pool of comparison is exponentially bigger than it ever was when we were cavemen and cavewomen. And when you're subconsciously comparing yourself to a pool that's exponentially bigger, you're almost always going to feel inferior because the pool is so much bigger. And
Yeah.
so again, like, humans just aren't designed for that amount of comparison, because it wasn't how we were originally, how we originally existed. And so I think this hyper connectivity, not just with social media, although I think social media is a huge part of it, but hyper connectivity for everything, for media, for all kinds of communication, social media is introducing much more anxiety due to what's called upward social comparison. And it's basically impossible to avoid unless you just simply avoid media, which is
Yeah.
generally what I do.
Yeah. And to maybe to like to even to add on to that analogy of, the small tribe, let's say it is like a full tribe of 150 and you're with 15 other males,
Yeah.
hypothetically, right, your age, those you're going to see that yes, in some value hierarchy they're better. They're better at hunting.
Right.
Well, but you're going to see that you're
Something.
better at skinning the animal than that person,
I love it.
and
Hmm.
and you're going to know, because they're in your tribe, that regardless of who's better, I'm going to help take care of you and you're going to help take care of me. And
Yep.
so when we're scrolling online, we're only seeing that this person is superior to us in this one aspect
Right.
without that kind of love, that knowing that they're going to help take care of me, and like you're not seeing all the things that you're better at them at.
Right. It's a totally unfair. I really love this point, Andrew. It resonates so much with me. It's like, take whatever skill you're best at, right? And if that is all you put online, and but you're comparing your best, so like a fair fight would be you take your best skill and compare it to that fitness model's body, right? So like for instance, if I have a cousin, he has close to a world record in solving the Rubik's cube, right? He's incredible. It's super
How
freaking
how how
cool.
quick? How quick?
Well, he did a 2 by 2, so four squares on each side in less than 2 seconds. It's like it's totally insane. And
It's
so,
crazy.
yes,
Holy
it's like
cow!
I'm super happy for him. But the point is, it's like, now does that fitness model guy compare his Rubik's cube solving ability to my cousin? Of course he doesn't, because it's not as visual or it's not as obvious. But that's kind of like how I would think about it if everything were equal, or if we were comparing apples to apples.
Sure. So how do back to you, kind of, your company, what you do. I tend to feel I I'm not on social media a ton. I definitely recognize that I was a pretty addicted at some point, and I think I've done a pretty
Me
good
too.
job cutting back. Something that I still kind of struggle with is Slack.
Yep, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing because so many
No,
people say
no,
this. So many
for
people
sure.
say this.
So for those that don't know, Slack
Oh god.
is if you work at a
Oh.
tech company,
Uh,
all of the internal communication
uh,
is on Slack. It's
yeah.
it's very much like Discord. You can have channels within, whatever, but I get Slack anxiety big time, to the point that I had to log out of the actual Slack application on my Mac, in order, and I just have it in a Chrome tab now.
Yeah.
So I can decide when
Yep.
I check it.
Smart.
If someone needs to get me that urgently, like, my phone number is on my Slack profile, so they can just call me, right?
Yeah.
If it's really that urgent. But it's something I noticed that I've had to do, because
Yeah.
I feel anxiety over having unread messages, and it
Yeah.
it,
Totally.
it kills me. So how do you see this play out in a corporate setting? For example, I work at Podium. We have 1,200 employees.
Yeah.
1,200 employees
Yeah.
it can be considered large, but it's still relatively small to a lot of these big corporations.
Mhm.
How the hell do we deal with this at work, Rob? I need to know.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, Andrew, and I'm happy to. First of all, I'm gonna like share a bunch of numbers with you, and then I'm gonna talk to you about what how the solution comes about, or like what the solution is. So let's just pretend you're at work and you're having one of these kick-ass days. It's an amazing day where you're crushing it. Like everything is going your way. You're just getting everything done. Like everything is just flowing, right? Like this is a psychological state called flow. And what research shows is that when you are in flow at work, you are up to 500% more productive than when you're not in flow. So what that means is, if you're in flow at work, you can and you block off, let's say, 2 hours, and you get into flow for those 2 hours, you can literally accomplish more in 2 hours than you could in an entire day. Sounds incredible, right? Now, here is the problem with this flow scenario. So, what the research shows is that every time you're in flow and you get interrupted, it takes 23 minutes to get back into flow. Well, a couple other statistics that are interesting are the average white collar worker checks their Slack and email inboxes once every 6 minutes, and we get a smartphone notification once every 15 minutes. So, if you're doing the math, it's super easy to see the average person is never ever in flow, and we're constantly interrupting ourselves by checking our Slack and email, and that means that we're never ever getting as much done work done as we could because we're never in flow ever. And so the solution is to block off time on your calendar and not check your email, not check Slack, and not be distracted by your smartphone, and get into flow so that you can get some stuff done. Now, I know the question that everyone's listening is asking is, well, Rob, how is that even possible? Because I know that I'm going to miss something, right? I think I'm going to miss something in an email or a Slack message or whatever. So here is the key. Here is the thing that all these companies, almost every single company I talk to, is not thinking about. The problem is that there are no written standards of communication or communication boundaries that are established and adhered to by the company. So let me give you an example. I'm just making all this up, right? Obviously, it could be customized for each company, and it could be, different standards depending on the department, right? But here's an example. So let's pretend the company wrote this out and disseminated all this to employees. It would read something like this: we expect that employees are available for communication between 9 p.m. or 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. local time in each time zone. We expect that all external communication with clients, which is generally going to be emails, will be read and responded to within 24 business hours. We expect that Slack internal messages will be answered within 4 business hours. And we expect that any issue that's more urgent than 4 hours that needs an immediate answer would result in a Slack phone call to that person, and that Slack phone calls will be returned as soon as possible. So if everyone knew all that information that I just said and it was written and everyone agreed to it, guess what happens? Now people can block off up to 4 hours of their day at a time and still not check their Slack during that time, not check their email, not be distracted by their phone, focus on their job and get their job done, and then check their email and Slack afterward and still be well within those communication standards that I just described. And everything, it completely changes how you do your job. And now you're not anxious because you have the psychological permission to tell yourself that it's okay to not check your email for 2 or 3 hours, and you're not anxious anymore. It completely changes everything.
Not anxious anymore. Whew, that'd be nice. So, I mean, Rob, a big piece of your work is this 4-hour workday.
Work week.
Personally, work
Four,
week.
four,
Yep.
four,
Sorry.
4 day work week. 4 day work week.
4 day.
I,
What did I
it
say?
could
Did
be
I say
4 hours.
4 hour work? Four
It
hour
could be that.
workday. Let's do that
4 hour
too.
work.
It's kind of like the UK study from, I think it was 10 years ago now. So it's probably even worse now. But that the average employee only got 3.5 hours of productive
Yes.
work. And
Hmm.
and again, I think the study was a solid 10 years ago.
Hmm.
It's probably gone down.
Yeah, so actually there is I frequently cite this 2012 McKinsey study, and again I wish it was, more than a decade, or way less than a decade old, but basically they followed around all these white collar workers, and what they found is that the average white collar worker spends only 39% of their week doing their activities for their actual job, and the other 61% is wasted on busy work BS like email meetings, collaboration, searching for information, blah blah blah. And I'm not saying that all those BS things could be completely eliminated, but the majority of them probably can be. Even if you just eliminate a third of the BS, you just got one day back each week right there. And
Yeah.
so, another statistic is the average white collar worker sends and receives 126 emails per day. If you're spending just 2 minutes per email, that right there, just your email, is literally almost exactly half of your day. It's 4 hours a day. And so, so if we spend 4 hours a day on email and let's say 2 hours per day on meetings, when on earth are we supposed to get our job done? The answer is you can't. You have 2 hours left just to do your job. How is that setting up anyone for success? It's not.
Yeah. So, so the four day work week sounds incredibly nice. really, up until recently, I was in different individual contributor sales roles and management roles.
Hmm.
And like the 4-day work week as an individual contributor, like sounded amazing, right? Would love a day
Hmm.
to, help the wife clean, get the house in order, and have a day to do
Yeah.
chores, and then the weekend to actually relax. But I
Yes.
think, so I'd love to, and again, this is probably just arrogant salesman Andrew just shitting on everyone that's not on sales. But I do feel like every other position, easy, 4 days in, out. Like, come on, no one does anything on Friday anyway. But like, I've got calls to make, Rob.
Uh
Like,
huh.
I've got demos and discovery calls to run. I've got clients to talk to.
Yeah.
And I need that fifth day really,
Hmm.
because if I need to make 50 calls a day,
Uh huh.
Monday through Friday, I don't
Yeah.
want to have to make 62 and a half Monday through Thursday
Uh huh.
to get the
I
job
understand.
done. So I'd love to dive in on your experience specifically with salespeople and productivity and just like shit, Rob, can I still hit quota with 4 less selling days a month?
Yeah, yeah, no, this is a completely valid question, and I for sure the number one objection I get to the 4-day work week from anybody, whether it's an employee or a CEO, I've talked to plenty of them, is how on earth could I get 5 days of work done in 4 days, right?
Hmm.
And again, it really comes down to what I said is essentially eliminating distractions. What you don't realize, or what the average person doesn't realize, is we do so much task switching, which refers to switching between different types of things. Like, for instance, you're switching between your email, then Slack, then your CRM system, then a phone call, then more CRM notes, right? Like you're going back and forth. And what you don't realize is if you were more focused and less distracted and just focused on one thing at a time and eliminated, not all of course, but if you eliminated the majority of the task switching, that task switching can cost you up to like 40% productivity, because your brain can only single task. A lot of people think that they can multitask. It's totally a myth. We're really just switching quickly and task switching a lot and single tasking. But the more often you do that, not only does it make it more difficult for you to focus, but it actually stresses you out. It increases these feelings of anxiety that you and other people are experiencing. And so it seems totally ironic, but by doing less at one time and focusing on one thing, you actually can accomplish more in less time. And it sounds totally crazy. Let me give you an example. Okay. Now, this isn't a salesperson, but I want to tell you about this client that I work with. She's a politician. Okay. And she's running for governor of Colorado. So, she's very busy. Like, if you want to talk about busy, you look at her calendar and all the crap she's doing. I'm like, I don't know how you do this all day. But she came to me and she's like, Rob, I just feel like I'm running ragged every day. I don't know how I can continue to do this through my election in November. And I said, well, hey, let me take a look at stuff and see what I can do. So I have her fill out this lifestyle design evaluation survey that I give all my clients. She fills it out, and I meet with her and I work with her for just 2 hours of time that we spent together. Now, she was incredibly open minded. And she basically implemented every single thing that I had to say without question, which is like my dream client. Because some people are
Sure, it
they're
does.
so,
It's a dream client.
some people are like, no, I need this thing or whatever. And I'm like, look, so she implemented everything that I said in just 2 hours. I had to take screenshots because it almost seemed like it was unrealistic. But I checked with her a couple weeks later, and I saved her 40 plus hours per week of time on just her phone alone. She went from using her phone 10 hours a day to 3.5 hours a day
Oh, 10 hours a day? Oh
on just
my,
her phone,
unreal.
just her phone. And so she said that, you know, like the difference in how she felt was unbelievable. And she's like, for the first time in a really long time, I went and had coffee with my friend. And I didn't, need to feel like I was, scrambling around. And
I'm
so
losing voters. This cup of
right.
coffee is making me lose voters. Yeah.
Well, and that's what she said. She's like, I need more time to call donors. Now I can call donors. And now because I didn't have the time to do that. And so it's it sounds like, again, that almost sounds like unrealistic. Like, how on earth could you? I literally saved her an entire work week of time after just working 2 hours with me. But it's those types of things compounded that you when you sum them together, you're like, oh my God, this is a complete game changer.
That's incredible. 10 I'm still blown away. 10 hours? Oh my gosh, the headaches I would get.
Yeah.
But then again, I spend 10 plus hours in front of a computer a day. So
Right.
I guess I can't say anything, because that's just modern work. Um so I guess talking about the the people that you work with, I've I think it's almost butchered to this point. It's such a cliche that like people don't leave companies, they don't leave bad companies, they leave bad managers.
Passes, yeah,
Part
for
of me is
sure.
like, okay, well, bad managers make bad companies, so it doesn't make sense. But then the other part of me
Mhm.
is like, okay, like let's hear this out. How, in your experience, as you've worked with companies, how does, for example, the manager managee relationship change as people shift to 4 days, or just even as people implement better technological awareness?
Yeah, so, yeah, happy to describe to you how that technology mindfulness can affect not just the employee employer relationship, but really somebody's mental health, all that stuff. So, I think in order to describe understand that, though, I would like to explain to listeners kind of what happens on a physiological level when we use technology. So, every time we check our email, we check our Slack, we get a notification on our phone. Generally, when we're interacting with technology, it can activate our sympathetic nervous system. This is the fight or flight system that keeps us alive when there's a threat. So, for instance, 20,000 years ago, when a saber-tooth tiger attacked my tribe, my sympathetic nervous system amps me up because I need to get out of that situation and survive and not be eaten by the saber-tooth tiger, which is great.
Increasing breathing rhythm, heart rate, cortisol, adrenaline,
Yes.
noradrenaline. Okay.
You got it, man. Absolutely. All those things get amped up, right? When we use technology. The problem is that sympathetic nervous system takes at least 30 minutes to fully recover. Well, if we're checking our email once every 6 minutes and we have a smartphone notification once every 15 minutes and our phone is ringing, what's happening is that sympathetic nervous system just keeps on getting amped up and never has a chance to fully recover. And
Mm,
this is the reason why the entire nation has greater anxiety and potentially even leads to depression later on,
yeah.
because when this sympathetic nervous system doesn't recover, this cascade of other chemicals goes in your body. Mainly cortisol is one of the biggest problems, and then we make worse decisions. We are very short with people. We don't want to have interactions with other humans. We essentially become a very inward, and we're and again, like, a lot of this is even subconscious. We don't even realize this is happening, right? I mean, sometimes we do. Like, if we see an email from our boss and it pisses us off, we clearly, like, you can see yourself, or
Sure.
you can feel yourself
Yeah.
sweating. But a lot of the time you don't feel it. It's just subconscious. And so, like, you're just getting amped up all day. And then, during COVID, and even not, even now, people are working late into the night and right before bed. You're amped up before bed. Well, guess what? Not only does that mean that you can't get to sleep, but the quality of your sleep is way worse. And when the
Mm,
quality of your sleep is worse, your entire next day is screwed. And so then you actually perform worse at work, which makes you more stressed out, which again, like, kind of leads to this downward spiral of despair due to the stress from your job. And so, the reason that I'm so enthusiastic about the 4-day work week is I feel like I'm giving people the ultimate gift. I'm giving you time, which for a lot of people, obviously this is arguable, but for a lot of people, that's even more valuable than money. But the other thing that a full day of time does is it creates greater psychological separation from your job. And so now when you have an extra day to down regulate and recover, you're not in this fight or flight mode as much of your life, and therefore you like everything in your life improves. You get to be you're a better decision maker, you're a better parent, you're a better husband and father, and you can be more productive and do higher quality work at your job, again ironically by being at your job less. So
Hey,
it changes everything, completely everything.
I'm curious if you've thought about, because I don't have an answer to this question at all. I don't even know if I even like a quarter baked theory. Why why do all notifications stress us out to some degree? And I ask this because like I'd imagine at some point we are, at some level, like we're happy to get a notification. At some level we're happy,
Oh.
and I'm assuming, right? This is just total hypothetical speak. Like, hey,
Mhm.
someone's reaching out to me. Like, oh, someone
Yeah.
wants to chat. Like, like why isn't why aren't notifications positive? Because I agree that they're not positive to even a small degree. Why aren't they, if it's some kind of sign that's or signal from another human being that they're trying to communicate with us? I feel like generally that would be like a good thing, but like it's not when it's coming from our phone at all.
Yeah, Andrew. So, like, you just touched on a bunch of really interesting stuff that I'd love to comment on. So, let's talk about email for a second, right? Other than social media, email is the most addictive technology we have. And let's talk a little bit about why, the psychology behind why email is addictive. So, there's a couple main components about it that are addictive. First of all, it uses intermittent variable rewards, which means that for example, when we check our inbox, we don't know how many emails there are. We don't know when they came in. We don't know who they're from. We
It's
don't know what
gambling.
the contact.
We're
It's
gambling to some degree. Yep.
exactly. It is literally the exact same thing principle that a slot machine uses to get people to continue gambling. Intermittent variable rewards. But the second thing, and you touched on this as well, is it involves social reciprocity. We know that from not every email, but for a lot of emails, there's another human reaching out, and humans are programmed to be have reciprocity as a matter of trust. Trust and respect are the two main components of all human relationships, and trust comes from reciprocity. And so even if you hate my guts and I email you, you're still going to feel this innate obligation to respond to my email because it's built into you, it's hardwired into you. And so those two things, and the other thing is, when other people contact us, it does, again, to your point, it does make us feel needed and wanted and important. And that is a very innate human desire for every single person. And so you have these three very powerful psychological things that make email addictive. And even though it really isn't the best use of our time, we are just drawn to it because of the three things that I just said. Well, I think another part though of to answer more directly answer your question in terms of why are, even if we know that notifications are bad, why do we still pay attention to them? I think it's because we fear that we will something bad will happen and we will lose our job. So for instance, you as a salesperson, you might worry, hey, if I don't check my email every 6 minutes, I might miss that lead and that could be a sale. And if I don't make my quota this month for the third month in a row, I'm going to get fired. And so ultimately it comes down to some version of that for everybody, right? Where it's this, if I don't get this piece of information, it's going to negatively impact me and my job. And that could ultimately lead to me to get fired. But here's the reality is I will share with you that I'm kind of play this game where I see how long I can go without checking my email. And I think I've gone up to, and by the way, I don't even put an autoresponder on most of the time that says I don't check it. I just don't check it. And I'm talking like during a normal week too, like a normal work week, not like during Christmas, right? And I think I've gone over a week without checking my email and not a single major bad thing happened. I'm not saying there wasn't some small whatever that I,
Some
needed to
small
apologize about.
inconvenience. Sure.
Exactly. But I mean, I went an entire week, nothing really bad happened. And it was just like, oh, okay. I can probably go like, I didn't check my email this from Friday afternoon until Tuesday morning. Totally fine. I know that in any way, I didn't check it on my phone, my computer, no way for anything. And I think people just need to get comfortable with knowing that if they don't check their email for 3 hours, nothing bad will happen. And just experiment with that and then see that, oh, it is okay. I'm
Yeah.
not going to get fired.
As you were talking there, it made me remember a book called Dopamine Nation
Yes.
by Anna
Annie.
Lemke. Yes,
Yeah.
Anna
Uh-huh.
Lemke. Yeah, there you go. Researcher out of Stanford, incredibly
Uh-huh.
intelligent human being. But part of what she talks about, dopamine, is like it's obviously biologically, like we're biologically wired to respond to dopamine, right?
Mhm.
Dopamine is like, to your point, the gambling. Dopamine is what got us over the next hill to see if there was a deer on the other side that we could hunt and kill. Oh, damn it, there wasn't one here. Oh, well, maybe over that one. Right?
Mhm.
That's what really, like, it drove us to survive. And the way she describes dopamine working in the brain is, if you think of chocolate chip ice cream, shit, I'm gonna do this to myself and now crave it. Ah, um, but you think of chocolate chip or mint chocolate chip ice cream,
Mhm.
you're going to be taken back to when you had it. And it's going to be a pleasurable experience. But then you're going to know that you don't have it. And so if dopamine's a baseline, oh, I think of the chocolate of the ice cream, but then I dip below baseline. It like
Yeah.
legitimately is supposed to cause me pain, and that pain obviously manifests
Yeah.
through cortisol, norepinephrine, epinephrine, all those things. That
Yes.
pain of dipping below baseline is what will drive me to go to the store to pick some up or to go to my freezer. And so as you were talking, I was like, oh my gosh, I've read this. Like, it that makes so much sense. Like, yeah, the concept, the idea of speaking to another person, someone wants to talk to me, is great. That's that kind of initial boost. But then I'm brought into pain through
Yeah.
cortisol to actually
Yes.
take action and check that
Mhm.
message.
I love that. First of all, I really love that book, Andrew. That's a great, great, great reference. And on a related point from that book, there is a there is a chart in there that really scared the shit out of me, and I just want to tell listeners about it because I can help you understand why, like chemically, why social media is so bad. So she measured baseline dopamine levels, and then in people, right? She did this study, and then she measured, okay, if you add something to their body, like if they eat chocolate, how much more dopamine they have, right? And so, for instance, chocolate was, I can't remember exactly, but it was about a 50% increase in dopamine compared to baseline. Sounds
Yep.
reasonable. Having sex is about a 100% increase, so double the amount of dopamine. Uh, Taking nicotine or ingesting nicotine is 150%. And then taking cocaine is 225%. So over three times the amount of dopamine when you take cocaine. Well, what's interesting is the same circuitry that is lit up in your, so like they've done studies about social media use and the circuits that are lit up in your brain. The same circuitry that's lit up when you take cocaine is lit up when you use social media. And so you can infer, and again, like it's not as, it might be a little bit different in magnitude, but basically when you're using social media, you have like three times the amount of dopamine as baseline. And to your point, what goes up must come down. And so
Mm.
unless you're able to basically scroll social media constantly, afterward, you're going to get this crash, this dopamine crash, and your body's going to respond negatively.
Yeah.
And that's why, for instance, if you take a cell phone away from a kid who's been scrolling on social media for 3 hours, he gets freaking annoyed because he's like, I mean, for a lot of different reasons, but one of them is a chemical reason. Like there's an actual, you're taking away an addictive substance from him, and he doesn't like that. But
I
he's not
see this in my
viewing it as
2-year-old. We generally let him watch like one episode of Daniel Tiger a day.
okay, nice.
That's it. That's the screen time
Uh-huh.
he gets, nothing else. But
Mm.
turning the TV off, turning off Daniel Tiger is like a, oh, whoa.
That's catastrophe, isn't it?
It is. It's like, oh my gosh, this stuff is insane. Like, oh my gosh. And it definitely makes me mindful. I'm a relatively young guy, but smartphones and the capabilities they have today, like smartphones were around, but smartphone was like, oh look, I jailbroke my Galaxy S2 and I can play Pokemon on it. right?
Yeah.
That was smartphone technology. I think it was like my senior year that, like, or junior year that Instagram took off. The year
Yeah.
after that was
Yeah.
Snapchat. I didn't really get into it right away, but it's something I think about quite often. How am I going to teach my son as a very, very, very young human to avoid these when,
Yeah.
like, I actually didn't have that exposure as a young child.
Right.
Eventually had it obviously as a teenager and young adult, but by that point you're a little bit more wise, a little bit more developed. Maybe not by much, but a little bit, right? And so it's something I
Yeah.
think about quite often.
Oh my god, I have so many things to say about that. But the first one is I really like the book iGen by Jean Twenge. She's this
Yeah,
academic researcher who studies different generations, and she has this incredible graph in the book, and it's basically a graph of teen mental health and the incidence of like depression and anxiety. And you can see that, from like the 70s to to like the early 2000s, the graph, I mean, had some changes, but it really was relatively, it kind of oscillated around this certain range. And then all of a sudden, in about 2012, it just hockey sticked up, right?
yep.
And what happened in 2012? Well, two major things happened in the technology world. The first one was that smartphone penetration reached 50% in the United States. So it was right around when smartphones were becoming really popular.
My junior
The other
year.
thing,
There
yep,
it
there
is.
you go. The other thing that happened in 2012 was that that's when Facebook bought Instagram. And now it has been shown, this Facebook whistleblower last October has shown with proof that Mark Zuckerberg knew that Facebook was damaging the mental health of teens and causing them to be depressed and suicidal because of the algorithm and how it was showing them posts. And he did nothing for 4 years. Nothing.
Mm.
And so what Mark Zuckerberg just did is he's cashing in on the mental health of 2.9 billion people on those networks because he wants to make more money. And he's of course going to let you to believe that, oh, he's doing these other things. He's not. He's not. He could do the right thing, but he's not. And
He's no
here's the
Elon. What's Facebook doing to change the world? Like, come on. Like,
well, I do respect Mark because I think he really is a good business person. But and hey, when Facebook came out, it did connect people, but we don't need another 27th way to connect people anymore. Like there's a million other ways, right? Facebook isn't that unique anymore. It doesn't do something that other platforms can't necessarily do. And so, but here's the real issue, right? So you're talking about, well, how can I prevent my kid from, falling prey to some of these technologies? Think about it like this. So just Facebook alone, not any of the other tech companies, just Facebook alone has tens of thousands of engineers, and their sole purpose in life is to get as much time and attention from users as possible and keep you as long as possible on the platform. And those tens of thousands of engineers are also using supercomputers and AI to accomplish this.
I'm never
So
gonna
let's
beat
think
it.
about this for a second. How on earth is one human brain going to resist the efforts of tens of thousands of engineers plus supercomputers and AI? It's impossible. It's impossible. Like basically the answer is you can't, and it's designed to be that way.
I think
And
they
that's
talked about
why
that
I
in the what was the documentary that they did?
social dilemma.
Social Dilemma. Yeah, and Anna Lemke's in that one as well, right? But I can't remember who. It may have been Anna, but like you're playing a losing game.
Absolutely. It's and just like the house always wins in gambling, Facebook always wins with Facebook. Like when you're using Facebook. And and that's why I'm like I kind of have I offer people two different solutions if they want to reduce their social media use, right? I'm not saying, and in both solutions, you get to use it as much as you want, whenever you want, as often as you want. But let me just go through the solutions and then maybe users can decide or the listeners can decide if they want to employ one of them. I don't know. So the first one that I always say, which to me is for sure the easiest and the least least change, is you take all your social media apps and you put them from whatever page they're on now, which is probably your front homepage on your phone, and you move them to the very last page of all your apps.
Hmm.
And so now what happens is you're purposely introducing a little bit more friction so that you have to scroll a bunch to use the apps. And again,
Swiping
that's on
right two
purpose.
times is real friction nowadays, huh? It's kind of
Well,
sad. It's a sad commentary. It is. It's like, oh, I have to swipe two times to get to Instagram.
it is true. I mean, it really isn't that much more onerous. But what you will find is when you do that, the amount of times in the next week when you open up your phone and you automatically just hit the space where your social media was is scary.
Hmm.
It's really scary. You will see, and I know this because I was addicted to Facebook. I was checking Facebook on my phone at red lights and in elevators. And I'm like, what on earth am I doing? I'm spending every 20 seconds of my life that's free checking Facebook. This is totally crazy. And I realized I was addicted to it. And so when you move your apps to the last page, it introduces more friction and will show you how much you were automatically going to those apps. The second solution, which again is a little bit more extreme, but I think honestly the better one and the one I've employed for myself is you can not, and just hear me out before you make a judgment about this. So you completely delete the apps from your phone. However, you can still use them as much as you want, as often as you want, from a laptop or a computer. And so what that does is that still allows you to do everything. You can still use Messenger. You can still go on as much as you want, but you just have to be way more deliberate and intentional about your use. And obviously, it reduces your use quite a bit. It's not as convenient on purpose.
That is
But
what I
I,
do to
what
manage social media for the podcast.
do you? Oh yeah,
Yeah.
great,
Yep.
nice man.
Helps a ton.
Yeah, and
A ton.
here's what you'll find is they do all these studies of, they take kids and they'll do like these like tech retreats where they basically get rid of tech completely, right, for sometimes a week, sometimes a month, sometimes longer. But what they generally find is that the good news about like social media or technology addiction is it generally only takes about a week of not using it in order to get back to close to baseline. So if you don't if you don't use your social media for a week and you can get past that first week, everything else is gravy and it's not that hard. And it really isn't. That woman who, made all those changes she did and saved 40 hours a week of screen time, I had her delete all her social media. And she said, it wasn't even as difficult as I thought. It just took a little bit of an adjustment. I was like, yes, yes.
Dream
It's
client.
so great.
You said it. This all reminds me. You mentioned iGen, and I actually
Yeah.
think Jonathan Haidt in the coddling
Yes.
of the American mind talks about iGen quite a
Yeah.
bit as well. Um,
Hmm.
it sounds like they're two books cut from the same tree. Um,
Hmm.
it sounds extremely similar. Um, Rob, we're bumping up on time. Where can people learn more about you? Where can they find your work? If someone's in HR listening to this, or whatever department in corporate America, where can they find your work? Um, and we'll plug all that down here below.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can be reached. My email address is rob@humansfirst.us, or you can check out my website. It's humansfirst.us. One thing I'd like to offer the listeners is a complimentary 30-minute call from me to help you assess some of your technology mindfulness habits. And so if you just go on my website, again, humansfirst.us, go down to there's in the middle of the page, there's a button that says get in touch. Just fill out that form there and mention the Andrew Baker podcast. And I'm happy to, give you a free 30-minute call to chat with you a little bit about your technology mindfulness and see how it could save you some time or, some anxiety or stress and take that out of your life so that, ultimately you could spend more time with the people that you love and doing the things that you love in life.
Rob, you're the best. I appreciate you. This was fun. Um, we'll link all that below. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Really enjoyed the conversation.